Hello everyone, and welcome to the GeoTracker Vapor Intrusion Database training. This training is presented by the State Water Board's Underground Storage Tank and GeoTracker program and the Site Cleanup program. We are excited to share with you all tools and features in GeoTracker, as well as the Vapor Intrusion Database. This training is presented by myself, Tina Uris, an engineering geologist in the Site Cleanup program in the Division of Water Quality at the State Water Board. I am also a member of the Cal EPA Vapor Intrusion Workgroup, and I've been working with the Vapor Intrusion Database for about 3 years. I could not have done this training without my colleague Stephen Mullery, an engineering geologist in the Underground Storage Tank and GeoTracker program. So here's an overview of today's training. We're going to go through an introduction, background of how we came about using GeoTracker for the database, and then I'll hand it over to Stephen. It's going to focus on the electronic submittal of information portal and how you would submit data and reports into that portal for regulated parties. And then Stephen will hand it back to me, and I'm going to share the vapor intrusion building profile tool in that electronic submittal of information portal and how we get that vapor data and building profiles into the ESI portal. And then I'm going to end with just a summary of the training with some takeaways. If you have questions about today's training, please reach out to the GeoTracker help desk at geotracker@waterboards.ca.gov. And that would be for more general GeoTracker, so more from Stephen's presentation. If you have specific questions about the vapor intrusion and how to enter in data, please reach out to the Division of Water Quality Vapor Intrusion email. That's dwq-vaporintrusion@waterboards.ca.gov. Today's training is a couple years in the making now. This training was intended to be part of the Cal EPA Vapor Intrusion Workgroup Vapor Intrusion Training Series, but due to delays in the release of the Supplemental Vapor Intrusion Guidance document, the workgroup decided to move forward with GeoTracker training to reach out to the regulated community to support the input of data. The rest of the vapor intrusion trainings are anticipated to be scheduled for next year. For decades now, GeoTracker has been accumulating vapor data. We have 3,337 sites with vapor data. In 2018, GeoTracker's capabilities were expanded to house more vapor data, which now includes housing building metadata collected during a site's vapor intrusion assessment. Unfortunately, we only have 18 sites with building metadata. So in order to build a robust database, we really need your help with uploading vapor data. That way we can all further our understanding of the complex behavior of vapor intrusion. We also could potentially address limitations from other databases and develop an attenuation factor based on California-specific data. So the goal of today's training is to provide you all with a better understanding of how the data flows into the database and how we can all work together to build this robust database. So back in 2014, Cal EPA established a vapor intrusion workgroup. This workgroup is a multi-agency group with members from DTSC, the state and regional water boards, and OEHA. The focus of this workgroup is to develop a statewide, consistent approach for evaluating and screening buildings for vapor intrusion. This approach uses an attenuation factor to predict indoor air concentrations based on subsurface data. Over the course of developing this stepwise approach, the workgroup recognized the need for a database to house the data collected in California to further evaluate vapor intrusion. So the vapor intrusion database needs to capture factors impacting vapor behavior, such as the building foundation type, building age, or even the number of floors in that building. The database needs to be able to address spatial and temporal variability, so the sample distance to a building and the depth, and also the time between sample collections. It also needs to address data gaps from other databases. For example, it needs to evaluate residential building data versus commercial building data, and it also needs to be able to evaluate different climates. For example, the climate in the Tahoe region is different from the coastal regions. And lastly, the vapor intrusion database needs to house quality data to evaluate and potentially develop an attenuation factor specific to California. So the work group has assessed our existing databases with the above criteria in mind and selected GeoTracker. The GeoTracker database is a centralized location for uploading vapor intrusion data. It's a place where the public, stakeholders, and all agencies can easily access and view this data. And GeoTracker is already used as a case management tool for water board cases. But GeoTracker is not limited to just water board cases. We can also create non-case information cases to upload data from DTSC and other agencies to include even more data in the vapor intrusion database, which will only build a more robust database with more statewide representation to address data gaps and limitations. I also just want to note that our Site Cleanup Subaccount Program, our SCAP program, those funded projects and their cleanup agreements also include requirements to create building profiles and submit analytical lab data. So again, GeoTracker can only capture more data into the database. So a little more specific to vapor data in GeoTracker, under the California Code of Regulations, Title 23, regulated parties are required, but not limited to, electronically submitting analytical lab data and also setting up existing and new field points with correct field point classifications. We were also able to expand existing capabilities in GeoTracker to capture even more vapor data. For example, the building information, we can now co-locate those field points that are required, and we can further differentiate our vapor samples. I'll talk about more of this in my presentation about uploading vapor intrusion data into GeoTracker. There are other databases and studies on vapor intrusion, and we've been able to learn from their strengths and limitations to develop this database in GeoTracker. In 2012, US EPA published their peer-reviewed database evaluation and characterization for attenuation factors. The strengths of this database are it's a robust dataset of residential sites. It evaluated empirical subslob and indoor air paired data collected within 48 hours, which addresses that temporal and spatial variability. And out of the 28 states in the United States with VI guidance, 24 states use attenuation factors equal to or more conservative to the US EPA's. A few limitations are only a few sites are located in California. 75% of the residential homes have basements, but we know that only about 5% of homes in California have basements. And it also did not evaluate commercial buildings. Last year, DTSC shared a preview of their attenuation factor study at the California Land Recycling Conference. This study is currently under peer review and not ready for release. The study evaluated commercial and residential buildings in California, but was limited to 52 sites, with more than half being in Southern California. The study also evaluated empirical subslab and indoor air paired data, soil gas, and indoor air paired data, and groundwater and indoor air paired data. The study was limited by the number of residential sites that were evaluated. As we continue to learn from the strengths and limitations of other databases and studies, GeoTracker will be refined to capture quality vapor data to build a statewide database representative of California. So now that we know a little bit about the background of GeoTracker and the database, I'm going to turn the training over to Stephen for an overview of GeoTracker for regulated parties and the electronic submittal of information portal.
Hi everyone, my name is Stephen Mullery and I work with the GeoTracker Help Desk at the State Water Resources Control Board. For my presentation today, I'll be covering a general overview of the GeoTracker database and then going into the general data flow of how the regulated parties can submit data onto the GeoTracker platform. And then afterwards, I'll be going over a couple data upload modules, since it's kind of relevant to the vapor intrusion process. With that out of the way, let's continue. All right, so what is GeoTracker? GeoTracker is a data management system that was developed in 2000 to track sites that impact or have the potential to impact water quality in California. Most of the data collected in GeoTracker is related to groundwater. This database was originally developed to track leaking underground storage tank cleanup cases and to display these sites on a GIS map. At this point, the system was set up to receive direct uploads from the regulated community through a portal called GeoTracker Electronic Submittal of Information, or GeoTracker ESI for short. However, this was not required, and the files could be submitted to the water boards outside of the database at the time. This process was changed by January 1st of 2005 when the State Water Board developed regulations to require regulated parties to upload their data directly to GeoTracker. A link to the regulations have been provided on this presentation. So there are three main groups of users that utilize GeoTracker. First are regulators that use GeoTracker to keep track of activities at a facility, have a storage area for electronic documents and data for their sites, and have a quick way to compile files for public record requests. Next, we have the regulated parties who use GeoTracker primarily for submitting data and reports to the water board. As I mentioned earlier, this portal for this upload process is also known as GeoTracker ESI. Finally, the public has their own portal where they can access data on GeoTracker. Common uses of this data are for environmental disclosure reports and for private research. For the purposes of this presentation, again, we'll be looking at the GeoTracker ESI portal. Now, I know there's a lot of information on this slide, but I did like this visual representation of how data goes through the process of being created by the regulated parties, going through the process of uploading it through the GeoTracker system, and then ultimately subject to regulatory review on our regulator portal. For aspects of this presentation today, I'll be going over the submittal process, which is circled in red on the image, and you'll be seeing this image, well, that section of that image in future slides. So what you see here is a general process of what a user would typically go through to submit data onto GeoTracker. So the first thing would be first by going to this web page and then creating an account. And once you're in the account, you should be able to submit access to a particular facility. Based off your account type, the request will be reviewed by the appropriate party. We'll go into steps 2 and 3 in the next couple slides here, just for more clarification on that aspect. But once approved, you should be able to start using the existing ESI tools to either prepare and upload the files onto GeoTracker. Now, a common question that gets sent to the GeoTracker help desk is what account type should the regular party use? And so there are 4 different account types on the ESI platform. And the first one is responsible party, or RP, and that should represent anyone who's affiliated with the permitted site or cleanup site. And so if this particular party is it's a third-party group, they should be looking at the other 3 account types. Starting off with authorized RP agent. They should represent third-party consultants where their client or the RP does not plan to use the GeoTracker system to manage the uploads for their particular facility. And so for in this particular case, the third-party group would need to upload an authorization form, and a link to that authorization form is provided on this page. Now, If their client or the responsible party is using the GeoTracker system to manage their site, that third-party group will need to select either the contractor or laboratory account and use that account to manage their uploads. For more information, feel free to see section 3.1 to 3.4 of our FAQ page. So here are some other common questions for new users to this database. First thing is, what is the globe ID? And that represents a unique identifier for a particular facility in the GeoTracker database. And so this provides a nice avenue to search for a facility outside of the facility name and address. Next is, what is claiming a facility? And so claiming a facility is a common term that may come up when dealing with the help desk, but it represents a responsible party or authorized RP agent that has been approved by the GeoTracker help desk to start submitting files under facility record. Now this comes in importance in the next one, where it's, the next question is, who receives my access requests? And so access requests from responsible party or authorized RP agent accounts are sent to the GeoTracker help desk for approval. That said, access requests from contractor or laboratory accounts are sent to the responsible party or authorized RP agent accounts that already has access to that particular facility. Do note that contractor and laboratory accounts are not able to request access to a site record that is not claimed by a responsible party or authorized RP agent account, since though the responsible party or authorized RP account will need to go through that approval process in order to approve those contractor or laboratory accounts to start uploading. So keep that in mind. So after your facility request has been approved by the appropriate parties, it's time to start using the existing GeoTracker ESI tools. So the image you see on the left is what you're going to see on your account on the upper left-hand corner of your account. And these are some of the common upload tools that you may utilize for your sites. Starting from the top under the Upload EDD section, there is the EDF format, which is the electronic analytical data that you'll receive from your lab. The GeoXY, which is latitude-longitude data of your sampling points. GeoZ is well elevation data. GeoWell is depth to water data. GeoMap is just a map of the site in a PDF format. GeoBore is a boring log, also can be uploaded into PDF format. And GeoReports are just PDF reports and documents. Going to the next section is the check EDD. So for documents that are non-PDF, they have a specific format that needs to be followed, and the system, you can utilize this feature to check the format of these files. After that is the VVL search tool. This is where you can look up the valid value codes associated with these non-PDF files. I'll go into this a little bit more in the EDF, but just note that some fields require certain valid value codes to be utilized. And finally, the edit field points is where you can enter the sampling point names. I'll be going into that on the next slide. So the next step on the upload process is adding or editing field points. Field points, again, represent a unique identifier that are assigned to a specific sampling location, and they are required to upload before uploading the following file types: EDF, GeoXY, GeoZ, GeoWell, and GeoBore. At any time, field points can be added to the system for this facility. That said, it can be removed if there are no data associated with it. That said, if there is data associated with that particular field point, there is a process you can do to transfer the data to another field point. And that process will need to be done on the GeoTracker help desk end, so feel free to contact the GeoTracker help desk and we can help you out with that process. So some common questions about the field points in GeoTracker is one, is there a character limit for field point names? And so our recommendation is to keep the field point names 10 characters or less. And this is in regards to the EDF file. So the EDF file has two different formats. One what we call a fixed length format. Another one is a comma quote separated format. And for the fixed length format, the field point name field is limited to 10 characters or less. So any characters that exceed that 10 character max limit will be cut off in the file. And so in the effort to best match the name, what's available in the system and what's available in the EDF file, that's our recommendation, is to keep the name 10 characters or less. Now the next question was, should I create a field point for duplicate field samples? And our recommendation is no, both samples should be associated with the same field point. That said, there is a SAMP ID field on the EDF file where you can identify the duplicate sample and compared to the original sample. This field is the free text field, so you can provide enough description to identify the duplicate compared to the original sample. So more information about field points is available on our GeoTracker FAQ page in section 5.3 to 5.7. It covers a lot of general stuff for a variety of field points and sample points that are entered in this system. That said, I did include a link to the vapor intrusion guidance document just because they go over a little bit about recommended field point names for vapor sampling points in section 2, part A of the document. So the next step in the process is the check EDD feature. And the purpose of this is to check the format of the non-PDF files. Do note that this step in the process is optional since a lot of these checking features are available when the user is uploading the file to this system. Now, we did want to provide this option to consultants and labs so they can check these files prior to submitting it to their clients or their responsible parties if they are planning to upload it into the system. So the EDF is a zip file that contains a variety of text files within it, and each of those text files requires a specific format. The documents you see on this page are some resources the lab can use to produce this document. And so the first one is the guidelines and restrictions, which generally explains the overview of the EDF file. It contains a variety of fields within it and some of the logic in terms of producing that document. The data dictionary further defines some of the common terms and fields within the EDF file if the lab needs more clarification on those fields. And the EDF guidance letters essentially are meant for niche scenarios, but it helps the lab enter in data for those particular scenarios. Now going on to the next part of valid value code. So certain fields within the EDF file and non-PDF submittals require the use of valid value codes. Valid value codes contain a unique set of characters that represent a specific item. For example, these codes can apply to a specific chemical, analytical method, or sample matrix. The goal is to provide consistency in the data entry process. The full list of codes can be found on our valid value list webpage. That's it for EDF valid value codes that are not on this list. The regulator community can contact Enable Inc.'s EDF help desk and submit a request for a new code. Now, for more information on that submittal process and requesting the code, you can see that in section 4 of our FAQ page. So some common questions about the EDF file is, one, what is a log code? And that represents the company or agency that collected the field samples. So our entire list of log codes can be found on our valid value list webpage. Just note that if it's not listed on there, please contact Enable Inc. EDF help desk, and they can set your company up with the code if it's not listed there already. Next question is, what is a sample ID field? And again, like I mentioned a bit earlier, the purpose of it is to provide more details about the sample. This field is a free text field, and so there's no codes associated with it, and that said, it is limited to 25 characters or less. For vapor samples, there is another section where it covers a little bit more about the nomenclature for the sample ID field, and that is covered in section 2, part B of the document. In addition, during the upload or checking process, you might run into some error messages when uploading the EDF file. And so our recommendation is to first start, checking out section 7 of our FAQ webpage. It covers some of the, basic general issues. That said, the EDF file is, a complicated file format, and there could be a number of other issues that may come up. And so, if you or your lab is not able to figure out what the issue could be, feel free to contact the GeoTracker help desk, and we'll take a look into it further and assist you on what that issue may be. Next question would be how to link an EDF file to a GeoReport file. And so this linking feature is available through the GeoReport upload tool. That said, in that upload tool, it would list out all the EDF files that have been uploaded to this particular facility. So, so if you want to link the EDF to the GeoReport, the EDF file must be uploaded first before uploading the GeoReport file. That said, this linking feature is optional on your end, but it can be helpful for regulators to track down EDFs that are associated with this particular report. And in addition with that, regulators can link the submittals if they want to on their end. So after you were able to upload your particular file to the GeoTracker system, all of these submittals can be viewed under this View Submittal section. As you're reviewing these particular uploads, do note that there are certain statuses assigned to each upload. And so there are 4 different status types in GeoTracker. And the first one is pending status, which is indicates that the upload has been successfully submitted. That said, it is waiting for a regulator to review this particular document. Next is received, and this indicates that the document's been manually approved by a regulator. After that is auto received, and this would indicate where a system automatically approves the document, and this occurs 30 days after the submittal date. And finally, denied status is that a regulator goes into the document and manually denies the submittal. Please note that there is a 48-hour delay before a regulator can review the document on their side, so please keep that in mind. So one final thing I want to talk about submittals is how to delete a submittal through your account. And so this process can be done, but there are some criterias that you may need to know before you can be able to do this. One is that the status of that document type needs to be still pending. Um, if it's listed as received, then you would need to go to your local regulator and ask them to deny that particular submittal. Also note that the delete option is only available through the account that originally uploaded the file. So if you're using another account that has access to this facility record, you won't be able to delete that file through that other account. Feel free to see section 6.2 of our FAQ page for more details about this process. And finally, I wanted to provide a quick link to our GeoTracker ESI informational page, which contains not only some of the resources that I talked about earlier in my presentation today, but also some other resources that may help you when uploading files into the GeoTracker system. If you have any further questions about the material I covered during this section of the presentation, feel free to contact the GeoTracker Help Desk directly to the email address provided on the screen, and we can help you out further with that. In addition, if you did want a copy of the presentation, feel free to send us an email as well, and we can provide that for you. This pretty much wraps up my presentation, and I'll send it over to Tina so that she can cover the vapor intrusion aspects of the ESI portal.
Thanks, Stephen. That was a lot of great information and resources for us all. This next part of the training is going to focus on the Vapor Intrusion Building Profile tool and the Electronic Submittal of Information portal. We do have a guidance on uploading vapor intrusion information into GeoTracker, and this document is a step-by-step instructions on those expanded capabilities and new features in the ESI portal. I'll talk about these new features and capabilities in the next few slides. In this guidance document, we also have definitions for the drop-down options, and it is attachment 4 in the draft supplemental vapor intrusion guidance. This guidance document is also posted on the State Water Board GeoTracker ESI webpage, as well as the State Water Board's vapor intrusion webpage. Before we can start creating our building profiles, we'll need to put our field points and our field point classifications in the database. I'll be using this figure on the left-hand side of a house to help us visually go through how to correctly enter in our vapor data. So first we want to set up our field points and their field point classification. Our field points will be the sample locations collected in the field, and the field point classification identifies the sample media type. So prior to expanding our capabilities, any vapor sample collected in the field in the system would just be identified as a vapor sample. But now that we've expanded our capabilities, our vapor samples can be differentiated into indoor air, subslab soil vapor, sewer air gas. We also can identify crawlspace air that is not shown here on the figure. Correctly identifying our field point classifications will be key when we are setting up our co-located field points, which I'll explain in a few slides. Shown here is the new feature in the database, the building profile. At the top of each building profile will be the site or case facility that is associated to that building. I just want to point out here that the site facility used in this training is not an actual case. It was created only for demonstration purposes. The building profile consists of 3 sections, and I will go over those sections in the next few slides. The first section in the building profile is the building information specific to that building. There are drop-down and fill-in options. Definitions of drop-down terms can be found in the uploading guidance document. The metadata housed in this section helps us understand how building characteristics potentially affect the behavior of vapors. We will be using this house example here to learn about the building profile. Please note for this building, we named it house. For residents, we should try not to use personal identifying information. Instead, you should work with your caseworker to develop a naming nomenclature. Although we all do our best to not include personal identifying information, if the regulators do get a Public Records Request Act, we would have to disclose any documents we received. So after we get our building name in, we'll move on to, is this building on-site or off-site? So as we can see from the site map, this building is off-site. We also know that this house was built in the year 2000. And from the drop-down, we selected that this was a single-unit residential. We also know that the building occupants are residential. Looking at the house, we can see that it's a slab-on-grade foundation type. We have a ceiling height of approximately 12 feet. We have one floor in this house. We can also identify if there is a vapor intrusion mitigation system, which as we can see from this house, there is not one. And we can also select what kind of HVAC system is on this house. We have a heating and cooling system with this house. And this house is approximately 1,200 square feet. So once we add in the building specific information, the next section is co-locating those field points. So a few slides ago, we talked about our field points and our field point classifications. As you can see here, we have indoor air, subslab or crawl space, soil gas, ambient air, sewer air gas, or our groundwater. If we do not correctly assign our field point to the field point classification, we will not see it as a drop-down option. So our co-located field points section helps us understand how vapors are potentially migrating into a building, looking at relationships. So one of the goals of the GeoTracker database is to evaluate the indoor air subslab attenuation, which we consider the primary pair and refer to that as in the uploading guidance document. Understanding this relationship will help us with assessing the vapor migration pathway, and we could potentially use this to derive an attenuation factor specific to California data. So now let's use that house example and look at some samples collected. First, we collected samples in the kitchen. We have an indoor air and our soil gas. We really want to collect an indoor air and subslab, but we know that that can't be the case for all indoor air samples. So for our kitchen, we're just going to link our indoor air, our soil gas, and our ambient air. We also had a nearby groundwater sample, so we'll want to go ahead and collect that as well. And our soil gas sample was collected relatively close to the building, so approximately 10 feet, and no more than 15 feet below ground surface. So we can use this sample to link to our indoor air. For our bathroom, we were able to collect a subslab, so we really want to co-locate that indoor air to our subslab, our ambient air or our outdoor air. And then we also collected a sewer air gas sample, but we did not link our groundwater monitoring sample since it was up gradient. So building a robust database with these co-located field points will not only help us evaluate attenuation factors in the future, but this information can also be really useful when talking with case managers now and determining risk to a building. The last section of a building profile is the building outline or location. This section represents the spatial attributes for the building in relation to the site or facility indicated by the red balloon on the map. All of this information in a building profile provides essential metadata for the database and is key to helping us all understand the factors that are potentially influencing vapor behavior. Once we save that building profile, it is saved into the site's building profile dataset shown here. So as you can see, that house that we just created is now part of the site's building profile dataset. It is also added to the statewide GeoTracker vapor intrusion database. This is also where you can edit or add or delete a building profile from a facility's building profile dataset. So one last piece to the database is the lab analytical data, which is submitted electronically using the electronic data format that Stephen had mentioned in his training presentation earlier. So in 2005, Water Board developed regulations, California Code of Regulation Title 23, Division 3, Chapter 30, to require regulated parties to upload data directly to GeoTracker. We do have vapor data dated back to 2005. Unfortunately, this data's sample media is classified as vapor. But we can update existing field points to the appropriate field point classification to include this historical data into the vapor intrusion database. By creating building profiles, we are directly linking lab data to sample locations within or near the building. This will help us evaluate that spatial and temporal variability, as well as link the chemical and concentration to a building by matrix. Now that we've learned about field points classifications, building profiles, and the 3 sections within a building profile, let's hop into the electronic submittal of information portal and actually create a building profile. Shown here is the electronic submittal of information portal login page. So let's go ahead and log into the portal. All right, now that we're in the ESI portal, this is what it looks like when you log in. You can see we have tools listed on the left-hand side. So we're going to go down to Edit Field Points. This is where we can add or delete our field points. So once we click on Edit Field Points, it will provide you with a list of all of the assigned facilities for that ESI user. So here we have our test only, and please remember our facility here listed at the top is only used for demonstration purposes. It is not an actual case. So here at the top, you can add, upload, or even download field points. You have guidance on how to use each one of these in our uploading guidance document, or also the ESI user webpage has a lot of instructions and references on how to upload these. So let's talk about those field points. Remember, those field points are our samples collected in the field. We want to use some kind of sampling nomenclature. We have recommended nomenclature in our uploading guidance document. We also have these field point classifications, and those are drop-down options. So we also have a lot of drop-down options. So that's why it's really key to make sure that we're selecting the correct field point classification. So you can see here next to our field point names, we have these little X's. This is where you could delete out a field point. But if we navigate down to our indoor air 1, you can see that there's no blue X. This means that there is EDF data that has been uploaded for this field point, and it can no longer be deleted out of the database. On the right-hand side, we have these field point descriptions, and this is a way for the user to track their assigned buildings and building field points. So now that we have our field points and the correct field point classifications in the database, let's go ahead and create that building profile. So back on the left-hand side, you'll see the tools. We'll go down to Other Tools, and we'll select that Enter Edit VI Buildings. Again, this will provide you with a list of all of the facilities assigned to that ESI user. So we have our test-only project. And at the top, you see we have the facility listed. The facility is also indicated down here on the map by the red balloon. And this is where we can add a new vapor intrusion building. We can edit, or even on the right-hand side, delete out. Down here on the map, we have all of the buildings that have been added to this building profile data set. So let's go ahead and add a new VI building. So here's that building profile, and at the top we have our facility listed. We have our first section, which is that building specific information. That's that metadata bringing those building characteristics into the database. Our second section is that co-located field points, where we'll take areas within the building and locate field points to it. And then our third section is that building outline location. So let's start with our building specific information. And back from our figure a few slides ago, we had a house as our building name. And you see here we have those drop-down options. Remember, it was an off-site building. It was built in the year 2000. Building design, so we had a single unit residential. And all of these drop-down definitions can be found in that uploading guidance document. Our building occupants were residential. And we had that slab-on grade foundation in our house. Ceiling height was approximately 12 feet. We only had one floor. Here we can even bring in that vapor intrusion mitigation if we have any. This house didn't have a system, so we'll select none. But we did have an HVAC associated with this house, and it was a heating and cooling. Our building area was about 1,200 square feet. So now that we have that building specific information in the database, let's move on to co-locating our field points. So our first field point area was that kitchen, and we had that indoor air sample we collected. We weren't able to grab a sub-slab sample, but we did have that soil gas field point that was relatively close to the building. It was within 10 feet, and it was also no deeper than 15 feet below ground surface. So we're going to go ahead and co-locate that field point to our indoor air. We also had our outdoor air, or ambient air, that was collected. Didn't have a sewer air gas for this kitchen, but we did have a nearby groundwater, so we'll go ahead and co-locate that as well. Now to add remember we had that other area within the building, so to add that bathroom, we're going to go to add additional co-located field point group. And here you can just select it and add as many field point areas as you need for a building. So let's go ahead and add that bathroom. We collected an indoor air sample, and we did have that sub-slab sample as well. We did not have a soil gas sample that was collected nearby, but we did have our ambient air, and we did have our sewer air gas as well, and we did not have a groundwater. So again, we're really focused on this indoor air sub-slab pair. In the uploading document, you'll see that referred to as the primary pair. And these co-located field points really give relationship to areas within the bathroom, and it can really clue us into how vapors are behaving and migrating into the building. That last section is outlining the building location. So we'll say our house was just off-site from our facility. And once we got it outlined, you can clear the drawing, very easy. But we did a good job, and we have our building outlined. So we'll go navigate to the bottom of the page, and we'll see add this building. So once we add the building, we'll see that it was added to the facility's building profile dataset. It was also included on the map down below. So getting all of this information into the database is really valuable for us to understand vapor behaviors and potentially in the future evaluate that attenuation factor based on information and data collected within California. If you have questions about the ESI portal, please contact the GeoTracker help desk at the email shown on the screen. If you have questions about the building profile tool, please reach out to the Division of Water Quality Vapor Intrusion email. So to wrap up today's training, I'm just going to leave you all with a few key points. So why should we use GeoTracker for that vapor data entry? So again, using GeoTracker gives us a transparent process. It also allows us to capture quality data. And some of that data is required by our California Code of Regulations, Title 23, such as submitting that lab analytical data and creating those field points with the correct field point classification. We also already use GeoTracker for case management, and there are a lot of tools and features that not only help with vapor data, but other data entries. We can also build that robust data set in GeoTracker, not only capturing that lab analytical data, but also capturing that metadata, the building information. And all of this will hopefully help us address data gaps that we mentioned in the introduction. And in the end, if we use GeoTracker for that vapor data entry, we can all gain a better understanding of vapor behavior. Our responsible parties and consultants, they play a really important part in this vapor data entry. They are the ones that are uploading our electronic analytical lab data and creating those field points. They'll also be creating those building profiles, so our building information, co-locating field points, and also the building outline. RPs and consultants can also go back in and they can update existing field points with those correct field point classifications. So for changing from a vapor sample to, say, an indoor air sample. And overall, you can use those tools and features in GeoTracker to enhance our communication with our regulators. We also have our regulators who also play a critical role in vapor data entry. Our regulators need to be confirming that the required data is being uploaded. They also can help support the input and QA/QC that building profile data as it's coming in. We already use GeoTracker as a case management, but we can also now use those vapor tools and features to further our case management. Regulators can also help by tracking that vapor data input. And also, our regulators can update the media of concern field to include that indoor air, indoor soil vapor. The staff at the State Water Board also play an important role and have responsibilities for this vapor data entry. Up here at State Water Board, we can support the input of building profiles, help track the input of vapor data, provide support to regulators and RPs and consultants, and continue to expand those database capabilities. For example, we're currently working on including barometric pressure and differential pressure as valid values in the database. And as we continue to expand our capabilities, we will update guidance documents as necessary. So what's next for this vapor intrusion database? Depending on how much vapor data we can get into the database, we can potentially develop that California-specific attenuation factor. This attenuation factor would be evaluated by the Attenuation Factor Technical Advisory Group that will be led by the State Water Board's Division of Water Quality. This group would be in charge of refining data inputs for GeoTracker to meet data quality objectives. The State Water Board Division of Water Quality is also currently working on amending State Board Resolution number 9249 to be more in line with current vapor intrusion science and include requirements for uploading building profiles. The State Water Board Division of Water Quality is also working with the Environmental Laboratory Accreditation Program to certify laboratories' use of vapor sample methods. And of course, we will always continue to outreach about this vapor intrusion database by training staff and supporting RPs and consultants. If you have questions about today's training, please reach out to the GeoTracker help desk, geotracker@waterboards.ca.gov. If you have questions specific to vapor intrusion, please reach out to the Division of Water Quality Vapor Intrusion email, dwq-vaporintrusion@waterboards.ca.gov. The Site Cleanup Program and the Underground Storage Tank and GeoTracker program would like to thank you for watching our training.